This is the first of two sessions. I'm going to be facilitating the first part of this particular session. My colleagues Amy Sang and Caitlin Theney also are going to be joining in this particular conversation. Next slide, please. So this session is being recorded, and a recording of the webinar will be shared with attendees via a link afterwards and also shared on our YouTube channel. So please feel free if you would want to either keep your camera on or go camera off. Any option is welcome. We also have a shared notes document, and we would welcome all of you to please register by just putting in your name and your organizational affiliation on that document. My colleague Emma is posting that in the chat right now. And then we also are going to be having a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, feel free to type those questions either on the chat or on the shared notes document, and we'll be able to get them in the course of this particular meeting. And then also bear in mind that you will also can ask the questions in your language of preference. Next slide, please. So just a couple of ground rules as we start this session. This call is designed to be a place of learning and conversation. We ask you to be curious, to ask for clarifications, ask for deep questions to challenge our thinking. We ask you to hold space for others, be curious about others' perspectives, hold space for them to ask questions and contribute. And also, we believe that in this particular engagement, we need to be respectful. We want to build community and not tear it down. We have a link to our code of conduct that has been shared in the chat. And if there's anything that you would want to report in terms of the conduct or how this call has been delivered, if there's an incident, then please reach out to the contacts that are in the shared notes document. Next slide, please. Great. I would want to now invite my colleague, Caitlin Theney, who's the Executive Director of IOI, to now give us a bit of an overview of what we are doing at Invest in Open Infrastructure and how we are going about our work. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome everyone. We're excited to have the first of these office hours and also to share more about the IOI Fund for network adoption. Invest in Open Infrastructure came about based on this aim of wanting to increase the investment in and the adoption of open infrastructure. Understanding that, just getting a prompt saying I'm changing my language. One moment. I did not change my language. The simultaneous translation will have fun with that. So for what we do at IOI, we're a not-for-profit initiative that really aims to see where we can help increase the amount of contributions to make open infrastructure the norm and help to embed that as a means of enabling research and discovery. Next slide, please. We do this in a couple of different ways. We conduct research and we design evidence-based tools and products to help support decision makers in universities, at the funding level, and research networks, more globally, infrastructures themselves in how they can help not only develop, but adopt and invest in some of these critical tools and services that we see, and the open source versions of those tools and services. We provide strategic support through targeted engagements to help implement some of that research and support infrastructures and other stakeholders in their adoption and growth and scaling of open infrastructure to help build the resilience and sustainability for these tools and services. And then lastly, which we're going to be talking about today, we run funding pilots. We also invest a good chunk of our time in helping to get more more organizations, funders, governments, national funders to see open infrastructure as a really critical utility for the research ecosystem and helping to bring more of that funding to this space and running research-driven funding pilots to see where we can diversify the sources of funding and also see where we can bring resources to areas that are surfacing in our deep engagement with the infrastructure providers and those that are looking to adopt these solutions so that we can have a more healthy, resilient, and sustainable future for research and scholarship. These core programs work together to help advance our mission and our focus on infrastructure, which we'll talk a little bit more about, is really on where these tools and services that researchers rely on can help further access to the data and the research, help empower researchers to do their work in line with UNESCO's Open Science Declaration, the Barcelona Declaration, the Nelson Memo in the United States, the recent G7 communique, and EU Council guidance. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Emmy, to share a little bit more about the IOI Fund before we turn it open to questions from you all. Emmy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. So as Caitlin was describing, funding pilots is one of our 3 core programs of work, and the IOI Fund for Network Adoption is one of those funding pilots that we're running. It is very much built on some of the learnings, lessons, and communities that we have been hearing from through our other funding pilots from the last 2 years, namely the open infrastructure funds, as well as many of the research and engagement conversations we've been having with colleagues and community members in North America, Latin America, Africa, and all around the world over the last couple of years since the founding of IOI. The objectives of the IOI Fund for Network Adoption is really focused on strengthening research networks in Africa, Latin America, and North America by supporting the adoption and expansion of open data and content infrastructure. We have 5 core objectives that drive this fund. Objective 1 is the increased access to open data and content. We understand the importance of open data and content in accelerating research discovery, and we're supporting projects through the fund that make research data more findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. We want to prioritize projects that demonstrate a commitment to open principles like open licensing and fair data. We'll evaluate projects based on how much they actually increase shared data and content and how they effectively track usage. And if you want to know more about the evaluation criteria that we will be using, you can refer to section 5 of our call for proposals document. The second objective of the fund is to advance collaborative research on critical global issues, particularly those that are related to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're looking for projects that use open data to address challenges like climate change, health, and sustainable development. And we'll also assess projects based on their potential to boost research activities related to these global issues. The third objective is about sustainable and community-driven infrastructure. We want to support projects that are built with active community participation and have a clear plan for long-term sustainability. And we'll be looking for evidence of increased sustainability for open infrastructure providers and services as part of the evaluation process. The fourth objective is fair and accessible research ecosystems. We strive to create fair and accessible research ecosystem. We want to remove barriers to participation and ensure that everyone has a chance to contribute, especially historically underserved communities. And the last but not least, we're looking at strengthening networks as a provider of shared infrastructure. By adopting proven open infrastructure solutions, we believe that networks can enhance their services and lead to advancement in open science. We're very grateful to have our partner organizations joining us in this journey. The Wellcome Trust is our anchor contributor, and we also have a few other founding contributors and supporters who are financially supporting the IOI Fund for Network Adoption. That is, Digital Science and Cale Austin Foundation are included in this group, and we are excited to have a few more partners who are in the process of coming on board, and we're very excited to be able to share that with you very soon. A brief overview of the IOI Fund. Again, the funding priority for the fund is shared adoption, implementation, and expansion of open data and content infrastructure by networks of research institutions. The focus regions of the fund is Latin America, North America, and Africa. The level of funding for projects we're looking for to support projects that are between 1 to 1.5 million US dollars over a duration of 2 to 3 years. Projects should start between October this year and February next year. The pre-applications are currently open, so you are welcome to submit a pre-application until the end of April anywhere on Earth. And I can go into that in more detail in a moment. So what do we mean by open data and content infrastructure? When we think about infrastructure, we're thinking about shared tools, systems, and services that make research data and scholarly content more accessible, reusable, and impactful. And in terms of openness, the openness element in open data and content infrastructure, we prioritize projects and services that adheres to principles of transparency, community governance, and open licensing. We believe that they are important in ensuring that knowledge is freely available and can be built upon by others. Some concrete examples of open data and content infrastructure includes open access repositories, data management systems, persistent identifiers, open source publishing services and platforms, and harvesting and aggregation services. And here I will speak, hopefully briefly, to the eligibility criteria. There are quite a number, so I want to start by pointing you to 2 different pieces of resources. The first is our call for proposal document in section 3.2, where you'll be able to find a full list of eligibility criteria for the IOI Fund for Network Adoption. And the second is our network readiness assessment tool, which is a self-evaluation survey that you can fill in, and it will return a automated response to you after you've hit submit to enable you to find out your eligibility as well as how likely you are to succeed in your application for funding. So coming back to the eligibility criteria, there are at least 7 key dimensions to these criteria. The first is about your network membership. So perhaps I should start by saying that the lead applicant for the fund should be a network. And networks, these networks should have a membership that are institutions or research performing organizations, or the members of the applying networks are themselves networks of institutions or research performing organizations. So here, a concrete example that would be eligible is a regional research and education network, or an RREN, whose membership is NREN's, National Research and Education Networks, whose membership are institutions or research performing organizations. Networks with only individual members are not eligible, and networks who have multiple types of members could be eligible, but only the organizational members are taken into account when we're thinking about the geography criteria, which I will elaborate on in a moment. In terms of numbers of members, for a national network, so networks who have members that are mainly based in one single country, we expect them to serve at least 10 institutions or research performing organizations. And if you are an international network, you should have members in at least 5 different countries. Moving on to membership geography, the majority of your network members must be based in Africa, North America, or Latin America. So the 3 focal regions of the IOI Fund. There are also additional criteria around the registered location of your organization or network. I'm not going to go into full details here, but you can find out more from our call for proposal document. Fiscal relationship with members is looking at the network's relationship with its members. We've been thinking very deeply about the types of networks that would enable an effective deployment of shared infrastructure within their networks that would benefit the network's research work. And for that reason, we decided to include this criteria where networks should have a fiscal relationship with its members, which means that members either have to pay a fee to maintain their membership, or the network distributes or cascade funds to membership. There are other ways where this fiscal relationship could take place. And if you're not sure, we would love to take your question in the question and answer session, as well as through email. The network must be able to provide a point of contact, so a person who will commit to reporting back on the progress and impact of the funded award to the IOI team. And because the IOI team mainly works in English, we do have to make sure that the network core staff that are eventually funded would be able to communicate in English at least working proficiency. A large part of the fund, a main objective of the fund is not only to provide financial support to the funded network, but also strategic support and sustainability planning support. And for that to be effective, we would be working closely with the network core staff. And so the ability to communicate in English is important for that. Last but not least, 2 things that are not listed here: current IOI employees, contractors, and clients are not eligible, and applicants must be able to abide by local laws that apply to their activities based on their residence. I'm also not going to spend too much time talking about joint applications because it is a little bit more complicated. But a short note to say that joint applications are welcome and possible. You will need a designated lead applicant, and more information about the changes to the eligibility criteria for joint application can be found in the call for proposals document, section 3.2. Here is an overview of the application process. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a network readiness assessment tool that is available for applicants to self-assess eligibility and their alignment with the fund's objective and the likelihood of success. The completion of this assessment is mandatory before the submission of your pre-application. We do use that information to help us also internally assess your eligibility. But I will also say that even if you don't eventually apply, we would like to have that data to better understand the needs of the communities that are interested in the fund, and whether or not there are future opportunities where we can help address some of those needs. More on this network readiness assessment and the link to that, if my team is not already putting that into the chat, more information is available in the call for proposal document section 4.1, I think. So once you've filled in the network readiness assessment form, you can find out whether or not you are eligible. If you are eligible, we encourage you to submit a pre-application. The pre-application form link will also be emailed to you in that automated email if you're eligible. The pre-application form is relatively short, I believe. There are questions around the applicant's basic information, like your point of contact name, job title, and email address. And then there will be space for you to upload your pre-application document, which is a maximum 3-page document where you will lay out your project's aim and objective, a timeline, and your network's readiness and expertise. There will also be space to upload a budget. We do have a budget template that you can use for that. The deadline for the pre-application is, again, the end of April. If your network readiness assessment returns with a result where it suggests that you are not eligible for the fund, you can still make the choice to submit a pre-application. That does mean that you are likely to have a relatively low likelihood of being funded, but the decision is yours. And so we also have the pre-application form URL in the call for proposal document. After April, so in May, we will be working with a community advisory panel and a fund subcommittee within the IOI steering committee to review and evaluate the pre-applications. And we expect to be able to announce the results of that on June 6th. Although depending on the volume of applications, that may change, and we will aim to keep everyone informed. After that, on June 6th, we will share with the networks that are invited to move forward to the full proposal stage, the sort of next steps. That will be the submission of a full proposal. The invited applicants will be asked to provide additional information on the impact of the project, detailed timeline and budget, a technical assessment and a financial assessment will take place, and etc. We will also be conducting additional interviews and research together with the applicant. There is an honorarium that will be provided to networks that are invited to this stage, knowing that it is quite an intensive effort, and we hope that it will help make the process fairer. The deadline for the full proposal we expect to be July 18th. Of course, that is also subject to change if we do announce the results for the pre-applications a little bit later. We expect that to also be slightly shifted. After the July deadline, the IOI steering committee, IOI staff, and additional referees that we'll be inviting into the process will be reviewing the materials in a lot of detail. And we expect to be able to update the applicants in around September on the next steps as well. And in the final stage of this review process, we'll be conducting a thorough due diligence process to verify some of the information that we've received so far and to assess various aspects of risks in that final stage to ensure that the network is ready to take on the project. And we expect the due diligence to take place in September. I know I just shared a lot of dates and deadlines, so here is a quick recap for everyone here. Once again, the most important deadline right now is perhaps the April 30th deadline for the pre-application. Again, noting that you have to have submitted the network assessment, the network readiness assessment prior to your pre-application submission. We expect the pre-application results to be in June, and then the full proposal and due diligence to follow from there. And the projects will start sometime in between October this year and February next year. With that, I think we're ready to take some questions. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to note them in the chat or the shared notes document. I see there are already plenty of questions in the shared notes document, so I will try to address them one by one, and I also loop in team members to help where needed. So a first question, is there a distinction between research data and just data that can be used for research purposes? For example, opening up museums and archival data and images could benefit research, but it isn't an output from academic research. Thank you for that question. I can try and then I will see if my team wants to add anything to my answer. I think for the purpose of the IOI Fund, if opening up of data and the provision of data infrastructure to do so will support the acceleration of research discoveries and collaborative research, particularly in addressing the global issues that we talked about, that would the project would be prioritized. I'm looking at my team here. If folks would like to add anything, feel free to unmute. Thank you, Robert.
Yes,
Yeah,
I would say that's a great way of describing it, and I would encourage to apply.
Yeah, +1 to that. Thank you, Caitlin. Second question, just curious, why not research networks outside of North America, Africa, and Latin America? Again, I'll take a stab. Yeah, we would love to be able to support initiatives and networks all around the world. Let's start with that. The choice of the focal regions at the moment is based on the past years of engagements that IOI have had in these particular regions of the world, and really wanting to prioritize communities that are, especially at this moment, in critical need of additional financial support to be able to move forward with implementation and scaling of infrastructures supporting open science and research. Caitlin?
I would add to that, I think it's a great way of assessing that. We know that there are needs for this work everywhere globally. As Emmy alluded to, for IOI, we're a small team. It's been very intentional work over the past 2 to 3 years to deepen our not only representation and governance, staff, research engagement with colleagues in especially Latin America and in Africa, so we could increase the representation of those communities and better understand those needs at a much more localized level. And so our hope is that we are able to expand this sort of work in future years, but focusing on these 3 larger implementation projects and regions so that we can have not only learnings shared throughout, but also to help facilitate North-South and South-South collaborations.
Yes, absolutely. The unique, special thing about this funding pilot is that it is really a great opportunity to be able to not only receive financial support, but also opportunity to learn from other funded networks as well, and to sort of peers on that journey of as networks who are trying to implement and expand and adapt their infrastructure for open data and content. Next question, do the 5 countries for international networks need to be in North America, Africa, or Latin America? That's a great question. I want to say, I want to start this by saying that I would love to check this with the team, and maybe we will elaborate on a sort of if we revise our answer that I'm about to give from there on, then we'll let you know via email. But from looking at the eligibility criteria, I would say no. The important criteria is here that the majority of your membership should be based in these 3 focal regions. So let's say you have 100 members across 5 countries in different regions. If the majority of your members are in these regions, then you would be eligible.
Yeah.
I will, yeah, Caitlin.
Hi, Jared.
Yes, I was just saying that in terms of how we had defined it in the call for proposals, is it depends on where the majority of the members are based of a particular network. So as Emmy has elaborated in that particular example, as long as the majority of the members of a particular network are within any of these 3 continents, then I think even if some of the members are outside of the scope, they should still be eligible.
Yeah. I will also note that the examples, so Emmy had mentioned research and education networks. There's also consortia, which some of you may be accustomed to in terms of university consortia, library consortia, other network-based organizations or groups that work across institutions serving particular regions. We went through a number of different examples, at least in helping to craft the eligibility criteria. And we know that there are groups, like I know that Alan, you had surfaced a different example. Many of those others for research and education networks, consortia, and even some of the organizations that, like I see Latin America Bioimaging is here. Also, there's groups like H3 BioNet, groups that have more of a geographic focus, where 5 countries would fall within those regions. But we do know that there are edge cases. So I think we designed it very much with a little bit of that flexibility, and we're happy to take those additional comments offline too.
Thanks, Caitlin. Instead of a joint application, can a single lead then make subcontracts with other partners? Yes, is the short answer there. Okay, not a question, but an observation. I think this is around some of the language inconsistency within the call for proposal document. Thank you for that feedback. We will go through and see and make sure that the language is as much as possible consistent throughout, to minimize the confusion there.
Just to add to that on the language side, part of that is also, and I appreciate the feedback, part of that is also intentional. This call and also those who are contributing to this call financially and in support of this, not all of them are coming from a scholarly communications background where we're using the same language. And so there's also some intentional use of data, which I know may not necessarily have helped with clarity for those that are more in the know or have been closer to IOI's work, because it helped broaden and bring others to participate in this by helping them see those broader aims and tying that into, say, some of the work in the digital public goods space. And so just to note, we're experimenting a little bit there. We're seeing what we learn. It's very core to what IOI does.
Yes, thank you for that feedback, and Caitlin for the additional elaboration. The follow-up question from there is what counts as content in this case? Um, it's very hard to be all inclusive, and I'm looking at my team as well. But briefly speaking, we would include content would include things like scholarly publications, preprints, um, reviews. Caitlin, I feel like I'm making a
Yeah.
list that that
The
will
core,
end up excluding
yeah,
things.
the core aim. So this fund, the design of it came from our research and deep engagement with communities in these specific regions. What we are aiming to achieve here is that we know that there is a need in many cases for this sort of shared provisioning of infrastructure to allow for the materials that those need to be able to conduct research and share that openly to advance understanding of not only some of the broader challenges, Emmy mentioned sustainable development goals, but also to advance science, advance some societal challenges. That sort of knowledge sharing infrastructure is what we are looking at supporting, right? And doing that by moving to help further the adoption, the expansion, the rollout, addressing the technical debt that may exist, helping to increase use for some of the open tools and services that we think are more suited for that job to support those research communities. And so that is dependent on, in terms of what content or what data looks like, it's dependent on the disciplines that are involved. It's dependent on the research communities that are represented there.
Yeah, it's really hard to make an all-inclusive list of what content infrastructure could look like or what type of content we're talking about. So if you have if you're hesitant to apply, or if you have questions, please feel free to email us with your particular case, and we're more than happy to
Yeah.
reply to sort of include that
Right.
to clarify that particular case.
I will note, I know that there was a question that was in the chat that was getting into some of the specifics of here's my idea of, well, what about this, but not that. We are trying not to kind of put our thumbs on the scale for very obvious reasons of saying like, yes, that would be, so there is a fine line. So I would say, we're happy to answer some of those clarifying questions, but providing answers such as, would this make it to the next round? We very clearly can't answer at this stage. And we'll be having community reviewers. So that will be for this first stage. So it won't be actually our determination. It will be that of the community panel in concordance with us.
Yeah. Although if you do have an eligibility question, again, would be more than happy to receive your email and to help clarify if where possible. Does network membership or for organizations include statutory research organizations that belong to one umbrella organization by virtue of their national law and yet semi-autonomous of each other? I hope I'm understanding that correctly, but the umbrella organization in this case would be eligible, as the statutory research organizations would be members of that umbrella organization. I'm looking at my team to see if other folks are reading that the same way. And again, I would say I know that because we are working across many different geographies, some of those national contexts we may not be as familiar with. And so it may be worth an email for that back and forth so that we can also look into the situation to determine that.
Yeah, agreed.
I think this may be something that we work with on a case-by-case basis because, for example, here in Kenya, there are a number of organizations that are conducting a lot of research and they're governed, let's say, by the Ministry of Agriculture or Healthcare. And so that particular nuance is different depending on the jurisdiction. So perhaps maybe the best way would be just sending an email and then we can address that on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Jerry. Can you repeat the bit about fiscal relationships with network members? I can. The applying network should have a fiscal relationship with their network members. I gave two examples when I spoke to this. One is the payment of a membership fee, and the other example being a sort of network distributing, cascading funds to members. The network, the cascading funds means that, if the network is receiving funds from some other entity and they help distribute that fund to their members, that would mean that there is some financial exchange between the network members and the networks. And so that essentially, I think for a fiscal relationship, we're looking at the sort of history of having financial transactions between the network and the network members. I'm looking at my team members to see if they want to add to that. The membership fee and the cascading funds are two possible ways that two possible examples of this fiscal relationships. There are many other examples of this, I'm sure. And again, if you are not entirely sure if the relationship that you have with your members are fiscal, feel free to email us and we can help clarify that. The majority of network members must be based in Africa, North America, and/or Latin America. Could an existing network subset its global network so that the proposed infrastructure is for this subset? I'm thinking you're watching me thinking real time.
I mean, I can take this one. I think, again, these are some of those really, really fascinating edge cases that, or maybe even not edge cases. I think this is where it'd be really interesting to see what that scoping would look like in that pre-proposal stage. So I would encourage you to apply. We've deliberately tried to set that up so that we can move through those pre-proposals quite quickly, and also kind of gather that information so we understand a little bit more about what some of the ways in which you all are thinking of this interpretation for open infrastructure support, what that looks like. So I would say I wouldn't preclude that or say that that could not move forward at this stage, and I would be really excited to see what the additional details for that might be through the pre-proposal stage.
Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, I think the main point is that we are trying to, the fund, its main impact we would like to see in the focal regions of the fund. And so if the infrastructure is established, if the project is established to serve communities majorly in Africa, Latin America, and North America, I would say we consider that eligible and we'd love to see a pre-application. There is a question around partners in Cuba. While, as far as I remember, Cuba, unfortunately, we cannot send funds to Cuba because of the sanctions. If the applicant is not based in Cuba and have abilities to send, to work with partners in Cuba as part of the project. Again, I say this with a big asterisk that I do think that we need to go back and check with our fiscal host and the due diligence team. But thinking about it out loud, I think it should be allowed. We would really need to double check this if possible.
Yeah, we're incorporated under a US-based nonprofit. And so unfortunately, there are some limitations based on what's known as the OFAC list. But we can go through and we can take that question offline and check. And so please feel free to reach out to us because I know that it gets complicated and also, we try our darndest to get the resources out to those communities best we can. So we're happy to double check on that one. It's a great question, Alan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually have a team member clarifying on the background that we probably potentially can't, but we'll double check on with our team and make sure that we have that ironed out.
Well, the infrastructure is actually in Canada, but it can be used anywhere, and Cuba would be one of the central partners of using it. So money wouldn't be going to Cuba.
Well, we're happy to take that off list. It's a really important nuance. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Having an established network with paid membership with 10 plus institutions can be quite difficult for some communities that are at the point of needing to scale their efforts. I wonder if that requirement is going to discourage many great projects from applying.
I can take this one, and also about why the call was designed this way. So for those that have been acquainted with our work at IOI, we have tested out funding pilots at a number of different scales, from $50,000 during COVID and the first year of COVID for maintenance and rapid response, to a participatory grant making exercise that was going to other global communities through the Open Infrastructure Fund. We also work behind the scenes with a number of other funders and institutions to help do more matchmaking with resourcing. This is intentionally designed to help with bigger network scale implementation of an improvement and rollout of infrastructure, right? And this is where I would say that if the network has not established a relationship with 10 institutions, this is where collaborating with another peer organization, the whole notion here is to help build that shared provisioning, because we think that there's not only more benefit when this infrastructure is supported by a number of additional institutions or research organizations for its own resilience, for its own sustainability, for getting that adoption embedded in these communities, but also that doesn't preclude you from working with another peer network to also get there. And so this is very intentionally, and I hear your point. I wish that we had an unending amount of resourcing to give out to smaller groups that are working to scale. This is about where we can help improve either the existing provisioning and expand, help to increase sort of the rollout and the adoption of this infrastructure, and look at that particularly for this level of adoption and the numbers that Emmy had shared before across either multiple countries, across multiple institutions, and or both.
Thank you. I hope that helps answer that. And in that same vein, are we expecting a new network or an existing network, or both are okay? In theory, both are okay, but do take into account Caitlin's answer just now that we are looking to help support networks that have an existing relationship with their membership, that are looking to scale their infrastructure and improve their infrastructure offerings.
Yeah. And I will note that, as Emmy noted, there's the pre-approval or the pre-proposal stage, and then there's the invitations for the full proposal. Should you make it to that second round, we also are going to be checking in with members, right? It's part of that review process to understand what that relationship looks like. And so it doesn't preclude a new network, but we do want to make sure that there's enough of that service relationship that we can work not only with those applying networks, but then also on behalf of their understanding of the needs of the groups that they are supporting in research and in higher education. So just to take that in mind.
Thank you. Question 12 is, I think this is quite a specific case. If you wouldn't mind the person who asked that question to put that into an email and send it over to us, we're happy to elaborate on that. Although, as Caitlin mentioned earlier, we are not in a position to sort of say, how likely you are to be funded. We can only answer eligibility questions at this point. And there's more information regarding how we evaluate pre-proposals in the call for proposal document that may also help you determine the sort of likelihood for success. Can you tell us if the recording and slides of today's call will be shared, and if so, where? Yes, the recording and slides will be emailed to you if you are registered to participate in this call, which I think everyone is. So it will come to you via your via email shortly after the call, and the recording will also be available on YouTube. The email address that you should direct your questions to is now in the chat as well, which is engagement@investinopen.org. How many projects are we looking to fund, and if there is any maximum funds per project, or is it uncapped? Yeah, Caitlin, please feel free to go ahead.
We are still actively fundraising for this fund to see if we can bring in additional resources to help increase this, but it has initially been designed for funding 3 larger scale projects. So one in North America, one in Latin America, one in Africa, with up to 1.5 million US assigned per network. Now, when we say per network project, that also involves the funding for, say, the infrastructures or the additional support that would be needed to help implement that project, right? And we're looking at those kind of network applicants at the start, but that's sort of for the entire implementation up to 1.5 million per those examples. So 1.5 million for each of those 3 projects. Should we have additional resourcing? Part of this we aren't going to know until we get into also developing some of those, getting more information on the budgets and the ask sizes for this. Again, that is subject to change. If we can fund more, we would love to. It would be in collaboration with those that have contributed to the fund and also based on the applications.
Thank you. There is in the pre-application form, there is an option for you to make your pre-application available to IOI to share with funders that we have and we hopefully will have more of those in our networks. Shall we see that there is a match between the pre-application and the funders' priorities? So if that's something that you would like, we would encourage you to select that option. How will you identify the network members you will be reaching out to? This is regarding the member check. In the full proposal stage, we will, once the applicant is invited, we will ask for names of network members that we can speak with from the applicant to sort of, to be able to contact them, but we don't exclude the possibility where we will be reaching out to network members that are not nominated, so to say, by the applicant. There is a question around the registration link for the second office hour call, which I believe the issue has been resolved. So thank you. And last question on the document, and I'll go to the chat after. Will you help in connections when needed, as sometimes some key players are reluctant and need some nudge?
Yes.
Caitlin?
That is part of this project. So part of this is not just allocating the funds to these networks and infrastructures, but also IOI staff that will be providing, strategic support to these projects, not only for the administration of the funds and the project planning and support in that regard, but actually to help aid in that implementation, bringing additional contacts and networks to bear, also our research connections with different stakeholder groups. And so, yes, that is the short answer is yes, we are there to help accelerate the pace of rolling out these projects best we can.
Thank you. And I note that we're 4 minutes to the top of the hour, so I'll try to keep the answers to the next questions brief. And if you do have more questions after this call, please feel free to join our second call or send us an email. Indirects are a big topic. Yes, absolutely. The maximum indirect rate for IOI Fund pre-applications is 10%. We encourage you, if you have administrative or other sort of budget items that are needed for the success of the work, please do list them in the actual budget. And I see a question that is being typed. Okay. That has now come through. You mentioned funding a project in each region. Can you clarify how this would work if the network has members in more than one of the regions? Will the network be assigned? Caitlin,
In
do
the
you want?
Yeah, I was going to say in the pre-proposal, you've got the option to select multiple regions, right, Emmy? And Emmy created that form. This is where I would say that we can't fully answer that right now because it will depend on the reviews and the discussion with the community review panel. These things will be taken into consideration in terms of how these decisions are made, but we're waiting to see how that pre-proposal stage goes. But thank you for flagging that. And it's something that I think we're expecting to see some of, especially with some of these more global or larger research networks that might touch multiple areas.
Thank you. All right, with that, thank you so much for joining us and for your questions. And I hand back over to Jerry to wrap us up.
Thank you very much, Amy. And also thank you to our participants for the questions. It's been a stimulating discussion. We thank you so much for joining us today. Just as a reminder, a recording of this particular session will be made available via YouTube. We'll also send the link to the slides and the recording. Before we close, we'd love your feedback on this session. We would just want to run a short poll so that we can know how you found the office hours session. So we will launch a poll shortly, and we would just want to get your feedback so that we can be able to improve ahead of the next session. So kindly just give us your input in terms of the questions that are being asked there. This feedback is very valuable in terms of iterating and making sure that the sessions are impactful. As we are going along in terms of filling in the survey, I just want to remind you that we are going to have the second of two sessions of the office hour sessions next week on Monday, March 17th at 1100 UTC. We're going to put a link in the chat shortly. So please, we welcome you to attend the conversation next week. We also welcome you to share the link to other people that you know would be interested in the regions that the fund is targeting. And we'd appreciate that particular support. If you have additional questions, also kindly just please send them over to us via engagement@investinopen.org, and we would be happy to give the feedback that is required. I'm seeing some good feedback coming in. I think perhaps maybe we can end the poll because we are at the top of the hour. So thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this session, and we're looking forward to engaging with you next week for the second call. Thank you very much, and have a lovely evening or day if it's depending on the time zone that you're on.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jerry.
You're back.
Emma, want to hit pause on the recording there? And thank you everyone for joining.